Hey everyone, and welcome back to Mastering English. So today we're taking a deep dive into something you guys requested a lot, something that came up in a bunch of the sources you all sent in.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, consistency. What do you think about when you hear that word?
Hmm. To be honest, my first thought is it sounds kind of boring.
Right. Like, not the most exciting topic, at least on the surface. But I gotta say, after digging into the sources, it turns out there's a lot more to consistency than meets the eye.
That's interesting. What kind of stuff did you find?
Well, for starters, it turns out that consistency is like the secret sauce to success. It's not flashy, it's not glamorous, but it's the foundation that everything else is built on.
Okay, I can kind of see that. Like, it doesn't matter how talented you are or how much potential you have. If you're not consistent, you're not going to reach your full potential.
Okay.
Yeah.
Exactly. And, one of the sources put it really well. They said that consistency is like the bedrock of any real achievement.
Bedrock.
Yeah, like that solid foundation that everything else is built upon.
Ah, got it. So you're saying that consistency is the essential ingredient that holds everything together, especially when it comes to something like learning English.
You got it. It's like, think about building a house. You can have the fanciest materials, the most elaborate designs, but if the foundation is weak, the whole thing is going to crumble.
That's a great analogy. So consistency is that strong foundation that we need to build our language skills on.
Exactly. It's about those small, consistent actions we take day after day, like practicing our vocabulary, listening to English podcasts, or even just spending a few minutes each day reading an English article.
I see what you mean. It's about building those habits that will eventually lead to fluency.
Okay, but real talk for a second. Being consistent is hard. Like, remember those New Year's resolutions we all made with the best of intentions? Yeah, how'd those turn out?
Yeah, not so great for me.
Yeah, same here. And one of the sources actually had a hilarious take on this. They said, if life gave us loyalty points for just showing up every day, imagine the rewards.
That's funny. What kind of rewards are we talking about here?
Like, imagine getting a free coffee after a week of consistently practicing your English. Or maybe a free massage after a month of sticking to your study schedule.
I like where you're going with this. Sign me up for that loyalty program.
Right. But sadly, life doesn't work that way, does it?
Nope. We got to put in the work. We got to earn those rewards.
You got it. And you know what? One of the sources actually compared our brains to toddlers on a sugar high, desperately trying to avoid nap time when it comes to doing the work.
Oh, man, that's so true. Our brains are masters at coming up with excuses, aren't they?
The best. Like, I can't possibly practice my English verbs today. I have to reorganize my sock drawer. It's urgent.
It's so true.
It's hilarious, but also kind of sad because all those little excuses add up and they ultimately hold us back.
Exactly. We get so caught up in the moment, so focused on avoiding discomfort that we lose sight of the bigger picture.
Totally. And that's where the idea of compound interest comes in. One of the sources made this brilliant connection between consistent effort and the way money grows exponentially over time.
Compound interest. Remind me how that works again.
Sure. So basically, if you invest a small amount of money regularly, the interest you earn on that money also starts earning interest. So over time, your money grows much faster than if you just made one big deposit and left it alone.
Okay, so how does that apply to consistency and language learning?
Well, it's like this. Even those small, consistent efforts in our English learning, like studying vocabulary for 15 minutes a day or practicing speaking with a language partner once a week, they accumulate over time. And those small efforts eventually lead to significant progress, just like those small deposits growing exponentially with compound interest.
Okay, that makes sense. So you're saying that even if we don't see huge results right away, those small, consistent actions are still making a difference. They're still adding up in the background.
Precisely. It's about playing the long game. It's about trusting that those small actions, repeated over time, will eventually lead to big results.
I like that. It's not about sprinting towards the finish line. It's about running a marathon, right?
You got it. And marathons can be tough. We're going to have moments where we want to give up, right?
Definitely. And speaking of giving up, one thing that really struck me from the sources is that consistency doesn't require perfection. We're allowed to have off days, right?
Oh, absolutely. Trying to be perfect all the time is like setting ourselves up for failure.
I've heard it said that perfection is the enemy of progress.
Right. One of the sources put it in a hilarious way.
Yeah.
They said trying to be perfect is like trying to eat spaghetti with a spoon. It's messy, it's frustrating, and it's just not necessary.
I love that. So it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to have days where we don't feel like studying.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The key is to not let those slip-ups derail us completely. Consistency is about getting back on track after a setback, not beating ourselves up for being human.
That's a good point. It's about progress, not perfection, right?
Right. And you know what really struck me is how all of this relates to you, our listeners, who are on this amazing journey of learning English.
Yeah, how so?
Well, one of the sources made a point that really resonated with me. They said it's not necessarily about talent or innate ability, it's consistency that truly sets successful language learners apart.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's not about being naturally gifted, it's about putting in the consistent effort.
Exactly. So to all our amazing listeners out there, think about your own journey with English. What are some small steps you can take consistently day after day to improve?
Yeah, like what are some things our listeners could commit to doing on a regular basis?
Well, it could be anything, really, like listening to this podcast regularly, wink, wink, or maybe spending a few minutes each morning reviewing vocabulary flashcards, or even just reading a short English article online.
Those are great ideas. The key is to find something that works for you, something you can realistically stick with over time.
You know what? I think that's a great place to take a quick break. We'll be back in a few minutes to dive into some practical tips and strategies for staying consistent and making this whole process a lot more fun and enjoyable.
Sounds great. I'm looking forward to it. Welcome back, everyone. So before the break, we were talking about the power of consistency in learning English.
And how even small actions, done consistently, can lead to some pretty amazing results.
Exactly.
But we all know that staying consistent can be, well, a little challenging sometimes.
Yeah, for sure.
Life gets in the way, motivation dips, you know the drill.
I know it all too well.
So what can we do about it?
Right.
Well, luckily for us, the sources you all sent in had some pretty awesome tips and strategies for making consistency a little less daunting and a lot more fun.
Okay, I'm all ears. Let's hear them.
All right, so tip number 1, drum roll please, is to start small.
Start small. What do you mean by that?
Well, it's all about setting realistic goals, right?
Yeah.
Instead of trying to do everything at once, like becoming fluent overnight, which, let's be honest, is pretty much impossible.
Yeah, that's setting yourself up for failure.
Exactly. So instead of aiming for this huge, overwhelming goal, break it down into smaller, more manageable steps.
Okay, so what would that look like in practice? Can you give me an example?
Sure. Let's say your goal is to improve your speaking fluency. Instead of saying, I'm going to have a 30-minute conversation in English every day, which might feel a little intimidating, start with something smaller, like I'm going to practice speaking for 5 minutes every day, or even just I'm going to say one sentence out loud in English every day.
Okay, I see your point. Starting small makes the goal feel less overwhelming and more achievable.
Exactly. And you know what happens when we achieve those small goals?
What?
We build momentum. We start to feel good about our progress, and that motivates us to keep going.
That makes sense. It's like that snowball effect. It starts small, but then it just keeps growing and
You
growing.
got it. And before you know it, those small, consistent actions have added up to some pretty remarkable progress.
So start small, think big. I like it.
Tip number 2 is all about making this whole consistency thing a little more fun, a little more engaging.
Okay, tell me more. How do we do that?
Well, it's all about gamifying the process.
Gamifying. What's that?
Basically, it means finding ways to incorporate elements of games into our English learning, like points, rewards, challenges, things that make it feel less like work and more like play.
Okay. I think I get it, but can you give me some concrete examples? Like, how would I gamify my English learning?
Sure. Well, a lot of language learning apps already do this really well. They have points, badges, leaderboards, all sorts of fun stuff that keeps you engaged and motivated.
Oh, yeah, I've seen those. I never really thought of it as gamifying, but I guess it is, isn't it?
Exactly.
Right.
And you could also do this on your own without any fancy apps. For example, you could set a challenge for yourself, like learning 10 new vocabulary words every day for a week.
Okay.
And then if you succeed, you reward yourself with something you enjoy, like watching a movie or going out for dinner or whatever floats your boat.
I like that. It's like giving yourself little incentives along the way. It definitely makes the whole process more enjoyable.
Exactly. And speaking of making things more enjoyable, let's talk about tip number 3, finding an accountability buddy.
An accountability buddy, what's that?
Basically, it's someone who's also learning English, or maybe even just someone who supports your goal of learning English, and you kind of team up and hold each other accountable.
Oh, I get it. It's like a study partner.
Exactly. You can check in with each other regularly, share your progress, motivate each other when things get tough, and celebrate each other's wins.
That sounds great. I think having someone to share the journey with would definitely make a big difference, especially when motivation starts to dip. It's good to have someone there to pick you back up.
Absolutely. It's all about creating that sense of community, that sense of shared purpose. And you know what?
Huh?
It could actually be a lot of fun too.
Yeah, I can see that. Learning together, practicing together, it could definitely be a lot more enjoyable than going it alone. And it would definitely help with staying consistent, knowing that you're not just letting yourself down if you slack off, but your accountability buddy, too.
Exactly. And even if you don't have someone in your immediate circle who's also learning English, you can always find online communities and forums where you can connect with other learners from around the world.
That's a great point. There are so many online resources available nowadays, it's easier than ever to find people who share your passion for learning English.
Totally. So tip number 4 is all about embracing those inevitable setbacks.
Setbacks. What kind of setbacks are we talking about here?
You know those times when we miss a day of practice or we make a bunch of mistakes or we just feel like we're not making any progress?
Oh, yeah, I know those days all too well.
We've all been there. But the important thing is to not let those setbacks define us or make us feel like giving up.
So how do we deal with those setbacks? How do we prevent them from completely derailing our progress?
Well, one of the sources had this brilliant piece of advice. Forgive and forget.
Forgive and forget. Okay, I'm listening.
It's all about being kind to ourselves. We all make mistakes, we all have off days, and that's okay. The key is to acknowledge those slip-ups, learn from them if we can, and then just let them go.
So don't beat yourself up over it.
Exactly. Dwelling on those setbacks is just going to make us feel worse and make it harder to get back on track.
That's a good point. It's easy to get caught in that cycle of negative self-talk, but it's not helpful at all.
Totally. So forgive yourself for those inevitable slip-ups and then just get back to it.
I like that. It's a much more positive and productive approach.
And you know what? This whole conversation about setbacks actually reminds me of something really interesting that one of the sources brought up.
Oh, what's that?
They talked about the difference between successful people and everyone else. And it's not about talent or intelligence or anything like that.
Really?
Yeah.
So what is it about then? What sets successful people apart?
It's their mindset. It's their ability to embrace consistency as a way of life.
A way of life. That sounds pretty profound.
It is. It's about understanding that success isn't about those grand gestures or those overnight transformations.
It's about the day-to-day grind.
Exactly. It's about showing up consistently, even when it's hard, even when you don't feel like it, and even when you're not seeing those immediate results.
Okay, I'm starting to see the bigger picture here. It's about making consistency a part of who you are, a part of your daily routine, part of your overall approach to life.
You got it. And you know it's really cool.
What?
A lot of the sources actually had some really fun and practical tips for how to make consistency more enjoyable, how to make it feel less like a chore and more like something you actually look forward to.
Oh, I'm definitely interested in hearing those. Let's dive into those after a quick break.
Sounds good to me.
Welcome back, everyone. So before the break, we were talking about some fun tips for making consistency a little less, well, boring.
Yeah, because let's face it, sometimes the thought of studying grammar rules or memorizing vocabulary words can feel about as exciting as watching paint dry.
Oh, tell me about it.
But it doesn't have to be that way. The sources you all sent in actually had some really creative and insightful suggestions for making consistency more enjoyable.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Well, one suggestion that really stood out to me was the idea of reframing our English practice as a form of self-care.
Self-care. That's interesting. How does that apply to language learning?
Well, think about it this way. Learning a new language. It's like a workout for your brain, right? It challenges you, it pushes you outside of your comfort zone, and it helps you grow.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
So just like physical exercise releases endorphins and makes you feel good, mental exercise, like learning English, can do the same thing.
It can boost your mood, reduce stress, improve your cognitive function.
Exactly. So by approaching your English practice as a form of self-care, you're not just improving your language skills, you're also investing in your overall well-being.
I love that. It's a win-win situation. You're taking care of your mind and learning a new language at the same time.
And another tip that really resonated with me was to focus on the intrinsic rewards of learning English.
Intrinsic rewards, what do you mean by that?
Well, it's about finding those sources of motivation that come from within, from the activity itself, rather than external factors like grades or praise.
Okay, so what kind of intrinsic rewards are we talking about here?
Think about the feeling you get when you finally understand a complex grammar rule that's been tripping you up.
Oh, yeah, or when you're able to have a conversation with a native speaker and understand everything they're saying.
Exactly. or the sense of accomplishment you feel when you finish reading an entire book in English.
Those are great examples, and I think those intrinsic rewards are so important because they keep us motivated even when the going gets tough.
Exactly. When we're focused on those internal rewards, those feelings of satisfaction and accomplishment, the journey itself becomes the reward.
I love that. It's no longer about the destination, it's about enjoying the ride.
And you know what? It makes consistency a whole lot easier.
It does, because when you're genuinely enjoying the process, you're more likely to stick with it.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive into the power of consistency, I want to leave you with a challenge.
A challenge. I love a good challenge.
What's one small step you can commit to taking consistently, starting today, to move you closer to your goal of mastering English? Could be anything, really.
Maybe it's listening to one English podcast episode every day.
Or reading one chapter of an English book.
Or maybe it's having a 5-minute conversation in English with a language partner.
Whatever it is, make it something you can realistically stick to, something you can do day after day without fail.
Because remember, those small, consistent actions, repeated over time, have the power to transform your language skills and open up a world of possibilities for you.
So embrace the power of consistency. Make it your superpower. And watch as you unlock your full potential in English and beyond. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of consistency.
We hope you've learned some valuable insights and feel inspired to take action.
And we hope you'll join us again next week for another deep dive into a topic that will help you on your journey to mastering English. Till then, happy learning.